Battlefield 2042 has been out for about 5 hours now, and of that 5 hours, I've only spent about 3 hours of it actually playing the game. Now, if I had to tell you one thing about this game so far, and the bugs that we've kind of expected to be at launch, I will say most of them have stayed out of the actual game. Right now, the biggest problem and the biggest bugs with the actual game have simply been matchmaking and getting into matches. Once you're in, I haven't had a whole lot of problems staying in matches. I haven't had a whole lot of problems with getting kicked out or the game freezing, but what I have had a problem with is just partying up with friends and managing to get into the match at the same time, and also continuing from one match to the next. It seems like every time I try to go from one game to the next one, I wind up on a dead screen where some of my teammates get in, some of them don't, and almost always I've had to restart each game. In between each game, I've had to close the entire game out, and I've had to restart it. Now, that's been my primary complaint with the game so far. It's been very, very solid otherwise. If you look at the actual gameplay, which you'll see me playing here in the background, it's been very good. My first impression with it is it feels like Battlefield 4 that's much faster. Your guns register every hit as opposed to the Battlefield 4 kind of feel to the game where you would shoot a few times and some of the bullets wouldn't register. It feels very, very good. Combat is fast-paced, it's snappy. You have movement ability now that really you haven't had in any Battlefield title up to this point. From your slides to your grappling hooks, there have been a lot of opportunities to make things happen with your guy moving around and just your ability to avoid things in combat. Another big takeaway I've had from the game has been there's a lot more infantry fighting, just with the new maps and the new game being raised to 128 players. They haven't really leveled up the number of vehicles on the map. There aren't just 8 tanks rolling around on each side. There aren't, 6 choppers for each team. Realistically, what this is the same number or similar numbers of tanks to games like Battlefield 1, Battlefield 4, even Battlefield 3. The same number of vehicles on each side, just a lot more infantry to run up and support it. And personally, I think it's a good change. You aren't so bogged down on an objective when a tank rolls in that you really have to either give up on it like you have had to in past Battlefields. There are enough infantry guys around that you can actually take out a tank or shoot down a chopper or harass a chopper and force them to leave the objective if there's enough infantry guys that are able to spread out and start putting work in on it. So I think that has been a great change. There always seems to be action regardless of where you're at on the map. There seems to be enough infantry around that you don't have to travel too far before you find it. There are still the odd occasional moments where your team takes over a flag and you have to run a fair amount of distance to get to one of the other objectives, but for the most part, usually you'll see people in transition. Usually you'll see people still trying to push each flag, and really that to me has been one of the best things. It's just there's so much more infantry combat. It makes it much more reliable and much more enjoyable of an experience to be an infantry guy on the ground. Most of the guns in the game behave just like you'd expect them to. They all seem to have a place in the meta. SMGs are very good up close, but really struggle once you get away anything farther away than 5 or 10 feet, maybe a little bit far, maybe 15, I'd say. They can still get kills. You can catch people lacking, but they're going to be outshot and outperformed by most of the other guns in these other categories. ARs still seem like king in this game. They dominate close up. They're very good at mid-range. They get a little bit weak once you get past that like 25-30 meter range and guys start to get out there. But realistically, you can still get a lot of kills with them as well. And the LMGs dominate as long as people aren't up in your face, which, again, very good change of pace for Battlefield, whereas, especially if you go back to Battlefield 4 or Battlefield 1 even, a lot of the sort of weapons didn't have their space in the meta because they weren't just up to par. Especially LMGs in Battlefield 4 come to mind, where they just didn't have the punch that they needed to really down an enemy as fast as most of your ARs would. So it is a good change of pace that all of these weapons seem to have their spot in the meta, and I hope going forward we're not going to have 1 or 2 or 3 of these guns kind of excel past everything else like we've seen in some other games. Now, going on to DMRs actually also feel pretty good. You can get kills close up with them, but for the most part, you're going to be outshot. They really do shine in those mid-range engagements. The only kind of issue I've had so far has been with the sniper rifles. I feel like they're a little underpowered, where it still relies on you getting that headshot, and the bullet drop off of them is pretty severe. So they aren't necessarily the impact tools that they could be, where I feel like if you probably went ribcage shots, they should be one-shot kills. It would make snipers very powerful. It's a very difficult thing to balance as well, but in their current state, I just don't feel like there's going to be much of a need to call out a sniper rifle and really go support in any way. I mean, aside from your typical Battlefield sniper that goes and lays in a part of the map that has nothing to do with the objectives and just sort of takes snipes at people for his own kills and his own clips, I just feel like that's still going to be in this game as well, where you're not going to see a lot of sniper rifles really pushing objectives, and you're not going to see a lot of snipers really trying to play that kind of scout infantry that I think that is the role they should really fill in at. Now, the operators in game, a little underwhelming, I'll admit. I kind of expected them to be a little bit more powerful or a little bit more impactful. There's a pretty clear gap between the top two and the bottom two. I'd say the medic doesn't really have a whole lot of use outside of reviving your teammates that, let's face it, most regular players don't run around reviving people that they're not playing with. So realistically, the medic has the gun that can heal herself. She can heal her teammates with it. It's just not something you're going to call on a lot in combat that you wouldn't just throw down a med pack for in previous battlefields. So don't really feel like that's incredibly powerful, especially now that all of your operators can take med packs. They can take supply packs for ammo, and they can take rockets as well. There's really not that same type of class reliance that we've seen out of past battlefields. And it's really going to be more of a lone wolf style game where you're going to be able to impact the game in the way that you want all the time, regardless of how well your teammates are playing. Now, personally, I kind of like old Battlefield where, you know, you need the ammo guy, you need the medic to come in and revive everybody, you need the assault guy who's able to push the infantry, and you need the engineer who's going to be able to work on tanks and everything. I really feel like this game is going to be missing a little bit of that because they've switched to this operator mode. Especially because the operators don't really feel special. Like, nothing they do outside of the assault guy who has the grappling hook, which is realistically, I think, the best class so far that I've played. You know, I've spent a lot of time with all of them at this point. I've spent probably about an hour and a half with each one of them. A little bit less, I'd say, with the time I've been sitting on the menu. But I've spent a decent number of matches with each one of them, and I will say the assault guy seems like he's the most valuable, just being able to move with the grappling hook. If I had to pick a second, I'd say the sentry guy would be second. After that, probably the medic, and then the scout would be fourth after that. He just doesn't really give you a whole lot of utility compared to the others. The sentry gun is good. It's solid. There's a reason he's number 2, because you can drop that thing and have it watch your back, or at the very least distract enemies, which might keep you alive. After that, the medic, again, not a whole lot of space for the med darts, but they are okay. I know they used to in the alpha revive people, and they don't do that anymore. And they probably shouldn't, but I will say there just needs to be more of an emphasis on what these characters do if it's going to be part of the game. Because right now, you could pick any one of these guys, and it really doesn't affect your gameplay too much outside of being able to grapple to spaces that you normally couldn't get to. Moving on to vehicles. Vehicle combat feels good. It feels snappy. Driving controls are typical Battlefield. You feel powerful when you're in the tank, or you're in the chopper, or you're in the jet. You feel like you're making an impact. However, when I was on foot, I never felt like a tank truly just ruined an experience like it has in past Battlefields, where if you're used to playing Conquest and you're off on your own and you don't have a bunch of teammates around, you have a tank roll up on an objective with you and 3 or 4 other guys, you pretty much had to give up and just run away and hide, unless you were all engineers and all going to focus on it at the same time. With this new player base and player count being 128 people, you don't really have to run. You usually have enough guys around you that you can force a tank away as long as you're willing to do your job. So I felt like that was a good change. I feel like it has a good balance between feeling powerful and feeling like you can affect combat from a vehicle, and also feeling like you can get rid of those vehicles if you do your job as an infantryman. So I feel like the balance there has been realized and has felt really good. Obviously, this is just the beta phase. We're still going to be getting a lot more content. We're going to be getting a lot more bugs and problems, I'm sure, with the full release. Outside of just the black screening, essentially, where you get stuck on a loading screen that never kind of goes through, you have to restart the entire game. The bugs haven't been terrible. I know I'm gonna knock on wood right now and hope that doesn't come back to bite me, but the bugs have been fine. I haven't noticed a big problem with them. And hopefully they get those ironed out here over the next couple days of the beta when they start getting more and more people in. All in all, I would say when it comes to this Battlefield, it feels like Battlefield 4. It feels like Battlefield 4 2, with better gunplay, with better hit registry, and better mechanics, better movement as well. You're going to be seeing people start flying around the map. It feels like Warzone, but a little bit faster and a little bit more, a little less rigid. Warzone, when you slide, you know, you get that quick burst of speed and you do the slide cancel and everything like that. This game has a similar sort of feel with the way you can slide in and out of combat and keep your momentum and everything. But it doesn't feel as clunky as Modern Warfare does. It feels a lot smoother. It feels a lot more natural. And I will say it felt really good getting away from some combat engagements, especially getting chased by a tank, grappling hooking out of the way, and sliding down hills to avoid tanks that are chasing you. It's going to add for a bunch more of those great, spectacular moments going forward. One of the other issues I want to talk about are the AI enemies they have in the game. I don't love the idea of them adding AI enemies. I will say I got killed by one, I think all of one time, when I just didn't see him kind of standing in a corner behind me. They really do just feel like fodder, but I kind of understand why they're adding them to the game. And the big reason is, if you're playing with 128 players and you have a large number of them kind of quit mid-match, you don't want the games to become unbalanced. Because with that number of players, games can go sideways really quick, and really all the AI is there to do, even though they probably won't rack up a ton of kills, they're still going to exhaust your enemies and reveal their positions when they have to be shot at. So while I don't love the idea of the AI enemies, I'm willing to kind of hold off judgment and say maybe it kind of works out. All I know is it's going to lead to some inflated stats. You're going to feel pretty good about yourself. You're going to feel like you had some cinematic moments where you were just defending an area and there were so many people around, when realistically probably more than half of them were bots at one point. But who knows? It could result in some good moments for people that especially don't have as much of a try-hard sort of mentality with the game, where maybe they just want to play recreationally. It'll help them get some kills too and maybe keep them interested. I'm willing to see where it goes. So while I don't love the idea of AI, I do think it is something that I want to see more implemented across a bunch of maps and for a longer period of time before I tell you it's a bad idea. Hey guys, thanks for listening to my rant about Battlefield 2042 and the beta that just dropped. If you like what you saw, help me out, throw me a like, maybe hit that subscribe button if you want to see more Battlefield content from me. As always, I'm FTA Reaper. Thanks so much for watching, and I'll catch you guys in the next Battlefield video.
Ah, fuck, right on me.
Oh shit, yeah, no, he walked right up.